Well, good afternoon, everybody. As Samantha said, I'm Brian David Johnson. I'm Intel's Futurist. And what I want to do today is talk to you a bit about the future of screens. And when I was getting ready for this, one of the folks who were pulling together the Amplify program says, well, you had written a book about the future of screens from the past. So I figured I would talk to you a little about the future and the past of screens. And I'll tell you a little bit about this book that you have in your hands. Hopefully you've all got a book. Does everybody have a book? It's outside if you don't. Come on, everybody got a free book. Did anybody else get a free book in any of the presentations? Come on! I come bearing books. Okay, so, and then we'll walk through that and certainly take all of your questions. So on my first slide, if you read it very closely, it says, I work for a large company and we have a lot of lawyers. Next slide. Okay, so as Samantha said, I am Intel's Futurist. It's my job to look 10 to 15 years out into the future and model how people will act and interact with technology. And the reason why I do that is because for Intel it takes about 5 to 10 years to make the chip. So it's of vital business importance today for Intel to know what people will want to do 10 years from now. And ultimately what I do is I model what it will feel like to be a human and live 10 years in the future. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that. Now, to know about me personally, you can pretty much tell everything you need to know about me by looking at this picture. So the tall, funny-looking one is me. The short, really good-looking one is Arthur. Arthur was one of the first robots ever created at the University of Essex Robotics Lab. And I do a lot of work with roboticists and AI. And as I say, you can pretty much tell everything you need to know about me by looking at this picture, evidenced by the fact that I went all the way to the UK and had my picture taken with a 20-year-old robot. You can rest assured, I am a geek. I am a huge geek. I am an unabashed nerd. I love everything science fiction, and I feel very fortunate I get to bring all of that into the work that I do. And ultimately, as Samantha said, it is my job to come up with an actionable vision for the future. I'm a principal engineer at the company, and really what I do is I deliver a spec. I just finished up working on the 2019 platform, and I'm just starting on the 2021 platform. So that's really kind of my day job. And so to think about the future and to build this pragmatic vision, we have to think about what will the future look like. And very specifically, what will the future of screens look like? And this is typically what we're shown when people show us what the future could look like. This is the vision that we're given in advertising and what we're given in the movies as well, right? You've got a really good-looking guy or a really good-looking girl. You've got this super cool new screen, and it's all in this uber-modern place, right? This is what we're normally shown. I hate this picture. Now, I think this is intellectually dishonest. Now, I can also say that I hate this picture because this comes from Intel, which doesn't make me a lot of friends in the marketing department. The reason why I hate this picture is because if we're going about the very pragmatic work of building the future, envisioning a future that we can then go and build, and I look at this and I ask myself, where are the baby toys? If this is a vision for the future, where are the pillows? Like, where are the family photos on the wall? Where's the stuff that makes us comfortable, the stuff that makes us human? This is intellectually dishonest, at best. And at worst, I find it insidious. Now, on my next slide, I have a picture of what the future is actually going to look like. Who would like to see it? Oh, you're so polite. You're so polite. I have to tell you, so I spend a lot of time outside of Intel and outside of the US, and I speak to students all the time. And I was giving the beginning of this talk to a bunch of undergraduate engineering students. And so I'm there, and I'm Intel's Futurist, and I'm talking about the future, and I say to them, okay, who wants to see the future? 600 undergraduates, completely silent, except for one guy way in the back who goes, sure. I come all the way, and all I get is, sure. Okay, here we go. Here's what the future's going to look like. Hold on to something. Bam! Now, I got to tell you, if we're talking about the future of screens, this future is awesome. This comes from some social science research that we've done. This woman, she has a connected Ultrabook, a smartphone, she has a connected TV, she even has a connected picture frame. So from a technological standpoint, and certainly for Intel, this is a pretty awesome future. But the reason why I like this picture as a representation is it's full of stuff, right? She has all these things on the chest of drawers. The drawers open. She's in her bare feet, right? This is full of the stuff that makes us human. This is the type of future that I want to design for. I want to design a future for real people, for actual human beings. This is the type of future I would like to live in. I don't want to live in this future because this future looks like prison. I do not want to live in this future. I want to live in this future. This is awesome. Actually, you probably can't see it, but she has a pillow right there that actually says, chill out. So this is the kind of framing for the type of work that I do and the way that we envision the future and the way we approach it. Now, how we do that, as Samantha had said, is a process called future casting. And so please, if you remember nothing else about my presentation today, please remember I do not make predictions. Invariably, during the question and answer, somebody is going to ask me what Intel's stock price is going to be, or what the next big thing is. I don't know. I don't make predictions. It's my job to look out and get an understanding of how people will act and interact with technology, and then set about the very pragmatic steps to build it. And I do that using a mix of social science. We have ethnographers and anthropologists who go out into people's homes and study people. Not demographics, not countries, actually study people all over the world. We do 250,000 interviews a year with human beings. How they shop, how they communicate with each other, how they worship, and get an understanding of that. Then the next is we bring in all the technical information. What will all this technology be able to do, not only for what we do at Intel, but also in the outside world as well? And we start to ask ourselves, how can we use that technology to make those people's lives better? And then I pull in some economic data and even some science fiction and begin to make this model. Now, and ultimately the whole goal is to create products that will enrich people's lives. And also, because I already told you I was a nerd and a geek, I always include a quote from Isaac Asimov, the great science fiction writer and also a great nonfiction writer. And I won't read you the whole quote, but I give this to my students. I teach foresight and future casting in schools and graduate schools. And I always tell them, predicting the future is a hopeless, thankless task. How's that for a job description? Who wants to be a futurist? So one of the things that I was actually quite excited about was to come and talk to you not only about the future of screens, but the past of screens as well. And around 2005, we started doing work. I've been at Intel for 10 years. So around 2005, we started looking at the future of technology, where things were going. And I was the guy who kind of rocked into the room and said, I believe that the future of all computational devices is going to be entertainment and television. And they nearly threw me out of the building. Because we were Intel, we did serious computing, we did serious work, it was all about horsepower. And I came in and said, no, it's all about entertainment. And then I started showing them some of this, right? People love to sort of show facts and figures. Things like 500 billion hours of content by the year 2015 online, 12 billion devices in people's hands by 2015. That's more content than is humanly knowable and more devices than there are people on the planet. So how did we do? Both of those are wrong. They're actually higher. So it's not 500 billion hours, it's much, much higher than that. And it's not 12 billion devices. If you listen to Cisco, they say it's 20 billion. And if you listen to some other folks, it's upwards of 30 and sometimes 50 billion devices in the hands of people. And I think this begins to get us to the idea of the mobile revolution. But ultimately, the third piece is what we really focused on. That come 2015, television will still be the center of people's lives. And what do we mean by that? What we meant was that television is an experience. Television and entertainment is a mix of TV and movies and games and social networking. It's all the things that we're doing when we're not working. And we started to describe what those experiences might be and what they might look like. The idea that you would have much more information about what you were watching, much more access to the things that you were watching, that it would be ubiquitous, that it would be personal, you'd be able to personalize what you were watching, have much more access, and that it would be social. We would use it as a platform to act and interact with people. And so Then in 2010, we came out with this book, which actually goes through and talks about all those areas. It's kind of strange to be a futurist and have somebody come to you and say, well, this book that you wrote about the future is now a piece of history. But it's written about something that hasn't happened yet. It kind of makes your head hurt. It's like if you listen to this very closely, you can hear it vibrate with the resonance of time. But we have a look at it because it has all of the stuff. That's one of the things I do as a futurist is I hold myself rigorously accountable for the things that I'm talking about. And it's all in here. All the way at the back, we were laughing up front, I was laughing with Sam when we were out back. It starts in the beginning and it's all kind of fun and light and some jokes and things like that. And then it gets kind of serious as it goes through. And then in the back, there's actually algorithms and network diagrams. So if you get to the back of the book, oh, you're a nerd, just so you know. But the thing that was really interesting to me that ultimately made me want to bring this book, and again, thank you to the publisher, because I went to the publisher and said, wouldn't this be an interesting experiment to get it into your hands? Because the thing that we learned was that the problem, as we looked from 2005, and even as we moved to 2015, because this book really looks at 2015, it wasn't a technological problem. The chips were small enough, the chips were fast enough, the computers were getting fast enough, the software was good enough. It actually wasn't a consumer problem because consumers knew it and wanted it. It was a business problem. And that's what I want to talk to you about in the latter part of my presentation, that it was the inability for business to react to what technology was doing and to what people wanted. So with that said, let's look at the future of screens. Where are things going? So in my job right now, as I'm looking out to 2023, what will it be like to be a human? Probably the most important area that I've been looking at is shown in this graph, and it shows that in the year 2020, the size of meaningful computational power, the size of the chips, begins to approach zero. And I have to tell you, that was a geek test. When I said in the year 2020 the size of meaningful computational power approaches zero and you got goosebumps, you're a geek. Now, if you didn't get goosebumps, that's okay. You're going to have a great social life. You're going to have a really full life. You'll maybe even see the sun. I don't see the sun very often. But the reason why I think this is so important is because it fundamentally changes the questions we need to ask ourselves about the technology and the services and the businesses we are building. For decades, we had to ask ourselves, can we do something? Can we take a desktop and make it small enough so that it fits on somebody's lap? Can we take a laptop small enough and make it small enough to fit into somebody's pocket or their pocketbook? But when you have the size of meaningful computational power approaching zero, it's 14 nanometers or 7 nanometers. 7 nanometers is about 12 atoms across. What that means is you can turn anything into a computer. We could turn that chair into a computer, we could turn my jacket into a computer, we could even turn my body into a computer. So the question we have to ask ourselves is not, can we do something? Because we know that we can turn anything into a computer. The question now becomes, what? What do we want to do? And more importantly, why do we want to do it? I think it's a very radical shift in how we think about the technologies and the businesses that we're building. And so some of the things that this brings about is, well, we've all heard about big data. Right? Big data. It's big. There's lots of data, tons of data. It's big. It's big data. That's why they call it big data. Everybody talks about how much data there is. Enough already. Now what? We know it's big. Okay, what? So one of the things that I've been doing, the way that it will feel, what it will feel like to be a human in the era of big data, is that data will have a life of its own. You'll have algorithms talking to algorithms, machines talking to machines, all working through all this big data, all this information about you and me. And it will feel like data has a life of its own, and it will. And that's a good thing. That will make us healthier, it will make us more efficient, it can even make us more sustainable. But in this era of big data, we always have to remember that data, all those ones and zeros, it's absolutely meaningless until it comes back and touches the lives of people. That's the what and the why. What will it do? How will we use all of this massive intelligence to not just sell more stuff? How do we use all this intelligence to make people's lives better? How do we take that widowed 75-year-old woman who has high blood pressure and diabetes and use all of this intelligence to make her life better, to come up with services and support to make her life better. Because I'd say it is a tremendous failure if we use all of this intelligence just to sell more stuff. The other area that we've been looking at, which fits very specifically into the future of screens, is something we call the ghost of computing. And what we mean by that is that as you have the size of meaningful computational power approaching zero and you can turn anything into a computer, something specifically happens to all of these screens. Right now we live in a world of screens. I was invited to come talk to you about the future of screens. So what about all these screens? What happens to them? So get ready, here's the big animation. So we've got all of these screens. When you have the size of meaningful computational power approaching zero, something happens. Those screens disappear. You want to see it again? That's it. That's as good as it gets, people. Just so you know, that's like all the money went into that. Here it goes. All of those screens disappear. Now, what I mean by that is not that these screens are going away. And this is why the future of screens, I think, is so incredibly important. What I mean by this is there's a fulcrum point of computational power and intelligence. When you can turn anything into a computer, we'll be living in an environment where we're surrounded by computational intelligence. So we'll have more intelligence in our rooms, in our cities, in our cars, and not in all of the screens. So literally the screens do begin to disappear, that computing, in the way that we think about compute, it does become like a ghost. But in that type of world, these screens and the tablets and the ultrabooks are even more important because they are the window through which you will act and interact with all of this computational intelligence. If you do not have these screens or some way of input-output, right, we call it I/O, how are you going to interact? How are you going to tap into all of that and actually make people's lives better? So that's why screens become so much more important, and we need to think about not just the devices, but what is the experience that people have? How will we use that? All of this intelligence, this secret life of data, this ghost of computing, compute moves to zero, brings us, I think, to a very interesting moment where, as our chief technology officer said, that science and technology have progressed to the point where what we build is only constrained by the limits of our own imaginations. That's awesome. So the problem with us creating an incredibly mind-blowing future has nothing to do with our science. We have an understanding of that. It has nothing to do with our technology. We have the ability now to turn anything into a computer. Our deficit is our imagination. Our deficit is our ability to imagine a future that is far better than the future that we imagine today. And you even go back and you look at the people that I talked to in Screen Future, the deficit and the reason why we weren't getting to this vision of the future had everything to do with businesses' inability to imagine a different future. And that's huge. That's a problem and also an opportunity. So what are these implications on business? What does this actually mean? Like, what are the, come on, futurists, tell us what's really going to happen. I wanted to ask you this. What do all of these services have in common? Cloud computing, management, app development, elder care, sustainability management. What do all these have in common? Does anybody know? Yes, ma'am.
Data.
What's that?
Data.
Data. Yeah, that's one thing. The other thing, none of these existed 10 years ago. Not one existed 10 years ago. We can argue about it during the Q&A. So I've had people argue with me. But most of these didn't exist. Now, for a lot of people, this freaks them out. Right? When I said that, some people went, oh, I'm worried. No. Because when we're living in a future where we're only bounded and held back by our imaginations, the fact that we can't know all of this, we can't, is a huge space of opportunity. It's the people who are worrying about old business models, the people who are not evolving, the people who are not using their imagination to come up with a radically different future for the future of business and companies. Those are the people who get really scared. But what I would put to you as you start to think about this world where we can turn anything into a computer and data has a life of its own, and we're living in a world where we're surrounded by computational intelligence, this becomes the landscape of opportunity. and where everybody can actually go out and think about what does that future look like. And what I would go through and say to people is that ultimately we need to imagine a radically different future than the future that we have today. So what does that do for us? To me, this is the big question. I take my job very serious. I realize that working at a company like Intel, if I do my job right, I can touch the lives of every single human being on the planet and make their life better. That's literally one of the goals of our company. It's in every conference room. It literally says, touch the lives of every human being on the planet. That's like a corporate goal. And in our lab, what we put is to say, and we want to make people's lives better. So I take what I do very seriously. That's why I'm here today. That's why I spend most of my time outside the company and outside of the US, is to figure that out, because the future just doesn't happen. The future isn't an accident. The future is built every day by the actions of people. So we have to ask ourselves, what kind of future do we want? What kind of future do we want to imagine? And also, what kind of future do we want to avoid? I think that's one of the things people don't like to have conversations about, which I talk about quite a bit. Because we need to talk about both. We need to talk about the futures that we want and the futures that we want to avoid. So I take this very seriously, and I went out all over and started asking people, intellectuals and folks in the military, folks in universities, folks in industry, asked this question. I got a lot of people very angry with me. People would say, well, why do you think you get to build the future? Or they would say, why is Intel trying to build my future? What if I don't want Intel to build my future? I said, no, that's not what I mean. I think that the future is built every day by the actions of people. And if the future is built every day by the actions of people, what do? Right? The future is that important. You can't punt. So what do you do? And I was talking to a gentleman by the name of Cory Doctorow, who's an activist and a science fiction writer in London, and we came up with this. That the way that you change the future is you change the story that people tell themselves about the future that they will live in. Very simple, but incredibly powerful, because if you can change the story that people tell themselves about the future that they live in, if you can help them imagine a radically different future, then they will make different decisions. They will make different business decisions, they will make different economic decisions, they will make different education decisions. And the way that you get people to change that story is through conversations. Talking to people, saying, this is the future that I want, this is the future that I want to avoid, what do you think? And you start to have that conversation. And I've seen it happen. I've seen it happen in schools, I've seen it happen in businesses, that if you can change that story, people will do radically different things. And so what I put to you today is that because you came here and got a free book, you will actually affect the future of your company. You will affect the future of the business world. You will affect the future of Sydney. That you will have an effect. And that's one of the things that I talk to so many people about. And I tell them that everybody will affect the future. Every single one of us. Now, it could be the future of your life, the future of your family, the future of community, the future of your business. But you will affect the future. And so the question is, what are you going to do? What is the future that you want? You have to have an opinion. So what is the future you want? And I challenge you to imagine a far more radically different future that not only is great for business, not only is great for your company and for your family and for your country and for the world, but very specifically tries to make the lives of people better. Right? I love gadgets and business and all that. That's all cool. But if we can actually set that bar higher for ourselves, we can actually make massive change. So on my next slide, I'm one of the most important pieces of information. But it takes a bit of a story. When I was coming up through industry, I was a speechwriter. I wrote speeches for my executives. And this was before Intel. And I was writing speeches for one gentleman who, in every single presentation that he showed, he said I had to include pictures of dogs playing poker. So I was very young. I said, okay. And I got really good at it. I didn't ask why, I got really good at it. And every single presentation I did, I had a picture of dogs playing poker. So if there was a screen, I would have the picture of dogs playing poker. If there was a frame, I would have it in there. You know what I'm talking about, right? The picture of the dog, the little bulldog's got a card in his toe. So finally, we were parting ways. He was going to a different company. I was moving on as well. And I finally said, so sir, why did we have to have a picture of dogs playing poker in every single presentation? And he smiled at me and he said, Brian, people love pictures of dogs playing poker. Why wouldn't you put pictures of dogs playing poker? So I've taken on this tradition. In every presentation that I show, I don't have pictures of dogs playing poker. What I do have are pictures of animals using technology. Now, the longer you look at this, the more freaked out you're going to get. Oh, and speaking about the future of business and business implications, I was talking to a room of about 600 chief marketing officers, and one of them was a pet foods chain, a sort of mega pet foods chain. He literally stood up and said, "Our new market." So with that, I want to say thank you very much. I look forward to your questions.